researcher, professor in many African universities, and specialized in ancient civilizations and oral traditions, of which he is a pioneer in the areas of teaching and research in Cameroon. Eclectic scientist, he is the author of many publications dedicated to African traditional literature, which he simply considers as literature without qualification, and to which he has contributed to reestablish its nobility. Before he obtained the doctoral degree in general and compared literature and the doctoral d'etat in arts and humanities at the universities of Bordeaux and Yaoundé respectively, he had obtained the diplôme d'études supérieures in general and compared literature and ethnology, as well as an international certificate in human ecology at the Université Michel de Montaigne Bordeaux III and Université Victor Sorgen of Bordeaux II. At the beginning of his career as researcher, Charles Binam Bikoi's academic choices made him one of the youngest researchers to influence the academic and pedagogic orientations of Cameroon, especially with the publication of Tales of Cameroon, which will become the first collection of traditional literature included in the National Secondary Education Curriculum. Since the first session of the National Council of Scientific and Technical Research in 1975, he has been actively involved in the efforts to implement a credible research system in Cameroon. He successfully worked for the National Institute of Education, the National Orientation Office of Scientific and Technical Research, and the General Delegation to Scientific Research. As research in the field of oral traditions was subject to a regional approach, he was part of the team that instituted and ensured the participation of Cameroon in the creation of CERDOTOLA, that is Center for Research and Documentation on Oral Traditions and Development of African Languages in 1977. Afterward, Charles Binam Bikoi was head of the Department of Publications at the General Delegation to Scientific and Technical Research in 1980, tasked with launching scientific publication in Cameroon and developing a center of documentation. From 1984 onwards, he successfully held the positions of head of the Department of the Scientific Corporation, analyst and director of Scientific and Technical Corporation at the Ministry of Higher Education and Scientific Research, while being a research fellow at France Centre National de la Recherche Scientifique. As the national coordinator of the project FAO/World Bank for the restructuring of the national system of agronomic research in Cameroon, he led the realization of a long-term plan, then a mid-term plan of development of this sector. And for this matter, he conducted studies that led to the creation of the Institute of Agricultural Research for Development, as well as the creation of the National Research Program on Oil Palm, a National Research Program on Rubber Tree, and the implementation of the Regional Center of Research on Banana Trees and Plantains. The skills acquired in the strategic planning earned him to be designated as the General Secretary of the Conference of Ministers of Research and Development of Western and Central Africa, and to be chosen in 1999 as Speaker at the World Conference of UNESCO on Science in the 21st Century. His research continued with the publication of several articles, a dozen prefaces or postscripts, and a dozen of books on topics, questions, and key stakes of oral traditions and African civilization, especially on religion, tribes, myths, maturity, creation, and the statics in traditional literature, rites of passage and conviviality, pedagogy and discovery, languages and linguistic policies. His efforts in writing down traditional great works of forest peoples of the south of Cameroon, especially Bassa, Kozime, and Fan Betty led to the publication in 2008 of one of the most monumental epic works of Africa and of the world, Mpomo, the Prince of the Great River, a Nzimpe epic of Cameroon. The heroic story of an empire founder, the Mpomo's epic, is a book with a symbolic, political, and philosophical scale because it highlights an ethos and an imagery that rejects the old and dominant thesis that considered the Bantu as a acephalous society. Since 2006, Charles Binam Bikoi has served as the Executive Secretary of CERDOTOLA. His leadership and the important structural reforms he has undertaken have enabled the institution to pass in 2010 from the status of a sub-regional African institution to an international organization dedicated to African heritage, whose scientific program now aims for the operationalization of the research with a strengthened Pan-African significance illustrated by the adhesion of new member states and a dynamic opening to diasporas. This transformation makes CERDOTOLA a preeminent organization of preservation, promotion, and valorization of African traditions and languages as development tools. In order to bring optimal support to economic emergence policies adopted by African states and the African Union Agenda 2063, the Executive Secretary of CERDOTOLA is leading a diplomatic initiative for all African states to conclude an African Pact of Development for emergence through traditions. Charles Binam Bikoi has been distinguished as Doctor Honorary Causa by the Binam American University, Benin in 2018 and awarded the title Honorary Professor of the Academic Union, Oxford in April 2019. Ladies and gentlemen, permit me therefore to invite Professor Charles Binam Bikoi to mount the podium to present his keynote. Thank you.
Languages, but my first language used everyday life is French. So permit me to be just what I can in French, in speaking, in trying to translate or express what I feel deep in my mind, deep in my spirit, deep in my conscience and in my intellect, so that I could share this banquet with you. So my English is not a good English. Oh, so please. Thank you. So first of all, I want to thank those who forwarded an invitation to the Executive Secretary of CERDOTOLA to offer reflections on language, communication, new media and development in Africa on the occasion of this important gathering of African investors, builders, developers and other problem solvers. I consider this a great honor and intend to respond in kind by engaging participants and issues as productively as I can in the spirit of the mission and vision of the International Center for Research and Documentation on African Traditions and Languages, CERDOTOLA, which is, as has been said, to preserve African cultural heritage and make it available for the resolution of the continent's pressing problems and the creation of opportunities in all walks of life for the present projects and prospects of traditions in Africa's optimum development. Let me start by apologizing if this title seems perhaps too scholarly and theoretical. It is not meant to be. The perspective, as you will appreciate, will remain as close to the practitioner's concerns and what is relevant to them as possible. At the same time, I trust that the high-level practitioners that you are have risen or are rising to the top thanks to definite abilities and skills in dealing with creative concepts and thinking processes. Indeed, contemporary African entrepreneurs are and will increasingly be creative thinkers and visionaries who can produce their own new ideas, harness the potential of available ideas, including abstract ones, tap into their often unsuspected implications, potential, and productivity, and then convert them into products and services, and sometimes much needed commodities. Truth be told, if we do not come out with our own ideas, we find ourselves using those of others, often unbeknownst to ourselves. Entrepreneurship with enduring ideas is thus a node that brings together the terms of the discussion targeting optimum development. It is a tool not only for innovation, a key function and characteristic of the competitive economies of the future, but simultaneously of cultural affirmation based on communication, including in African languages, that vehiculate a considerable unexploited knowledge and wisdom for new ideas, production, consumption, and their dissemination. Not industrialization. We have to go beyond industrialization or prepare industrialization by tradition. So this is the new operational concept CERDOTOLA is proposing, industrialization. As African governments were planning the economic emergence of the countries during the last decade, they seem to have forgotten that they set to emulate Asian countries, which based their industrialization and modernization on their own traditions. This has remained the case since the 19th century and the Meiji Revolution in Japan. Because of the needs-based or deficit-based vantage point and method, we have been thinking about our emergence and industrialization by borrowing instead of transforming what is already available. As I said, it is first and foremost our tradition, with minimal or zero borrowing. The concept is thus one of indigenous development, a launchpad for African development in the 21st century. Thank you for your attention.